I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a two-story house with a garage always packed with tools my father never used. My mother was an English teacher at a public school. She had the kind of voice that grew softer when she spoke to strangers, but hardened when she spoke to me. My father, a dentist, spent weekends calibrating equipment in the basement. He always seemed too busy to notice anything less than perfect. And to him, perfection had a name. My older sisters. I remember one specific night. I must have been 9, maybe 10. It was pouring outside, and the power went out for a while. We all sat in the living room, lit only by a candle. My sister was telling some story, made up, dramatic, like everything she did, and my parents were laughing out loud. I tried to join in, but my mother cut me off mid-sentence. "Let your sister finish, honey. She speaks so well." I swallowed hard. That's when I learned there was a silent order in the house. Those little wounds piled up like dust. Invisible, but always there. When my sister got her first car, a used one, my father made sure to say, "She deserves it. She worked hard in school." I was in the same room, with grades nearly identical to hers. Not a glance in my direction. Not a, "maybe on your birthday." Just the sound of the keys turning in her hand. Over time, I stopped trying to compete. I became the functional daughter, the one who helps wash the dishes, stays out of arguments, learns how to exist quietly. But in Columbus, things don't change easily. And somehow, I already knew my role there wasn't to be heard. It was to observe. When the letter arrived, I thought it was just another flyer. I opened it without expectation, sitting on the front step, the sound of the neighbor's lawnmower humming in the background. "We are pleased to inform you." I walked back inside, holding the envelope as if it were a passport to another planet. My mother was in the kitchen ironing clothes. My father was reading an article about the economy. "I got accepted," I said. "Where?" he asked, without looking up. "Boston. History." Silence. 3 full seconds. My mother was the first to react. "History?" I sat at the table, excited, talking about classes, the campus, the opportunities. They just looked at each other. My father took a deep breath and said the words that would change the tone of everything. "That's expensive. Very expensive." From that moment on, the conversation dropped in temperature. We talked about tuition, student loans, guarantees. They spoke in empty phrases. "We'd love to help, but we can't right now. Maybe next semester. You know your sister needed support too." But the difference was, she got everything paid for. I mentioned that, and the air grew heavy. My mother dropped the shirt on the counter and crossed her arms. "You're being ungrateful." "No, I'm just being realistic," I replied. My father looked at me the way people do when they've already decided not to change their minds. "It's not about preference, it's about priorities." Priorities. The word echoed for days. That night, I heard them arguing in their room. My name came up between cut-off sentences. I couldn't catch it all, but I understood the essential part. She always wants more. The next morning, before leaving for work, my mother left an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a printed spreadsheet of household expenses. In red, she'd marked, "University. Not possible this year." Below, handwritten, "I'm sorry." I put the paper in a drawer and didn't eat the rest of the day. The joy of that letter turned into something bitter. Even so, I started looking for alternatives. Scholarships, jobs, loans, but nothing seemed enough. And then, in a kind of controlled desperation, I thought of her. The only person who had never compared me to anyone. My aunt, my father's sister. My aunt lived in Cleveland, about 2.5 hours from here. She'd always been a different kind of presence. The kind of person who doesn't need to raise her voice to be heard. A neurosurgeon, calm and self-contained, with an aura that seemed to disarm even my father, who lived with his ego on guard. They didn't get along, which is why we rarely saw her. But she always remembered my birthdays. Always. I hesitated for days before calling. Her number was still saved on my phone, but pressing call felt like a kind of betrayal. When she answered, her voice was firm and warm. "Hi, sweetheart. Everything okay?" I almost said yes, out of habit, but I couldn't. I told her everything. The letter, the brief pride, the cold conversation, the not possible this year. She listened in silence. No impatient sighs, no, "but your parents." "You're coming here," she finally said. "We'll figure this out." I told my parents I was going to visit a friend for a few days. I took a night bus to Cleveland with a backpack and the university envelope folded inside my jacket. She was waiting at the station, wearing jeans and a simple coat, her hair tied back carelessly. Nothing like the distant doctor image I'd imagined. On the ride, we hardly spoke. She just handed me a bottle of water and asked, "Are you hungry?" I nodded. She stopped at a drive-thru, ordered 2 sandwiches, and waited for me to start eating before she continued driving. At her house, everything felt stable. No shouting, no comparisons. She let me sleep. The next morning, before leaving for work, she left a note on the table. "Talk to the bank. If needed, I'll co-sign the loan. Someone has to believe in you." I stood there crying, holding the note. From that moment on, we saw each other often. She taught me small things, how to handle paperwork, how to talk to people who think they have power, how to keep your face neutral when the world tries to shrink you. Sometimes we'd get home late from the hospital. She's still in her scrubs, me helping her carry the keys. Things became strangely calm for a while. I went to Cleveland on weekends, studied loan documents with my aunt, and went back home as if nothing had happened. My parents, maybe out of shame or convenience, pretended the Boston topic had died. We talked about the weather, the dog, the bills, never about what actually mattered. But my sister, she could smell a secret. She always could. It started with small comments disguised as concern. You've been acting different lately, you know. You've been going out a lot. Who with again? I gave the shortest answers possible, but she didn't ask to know. She asked to map. One day, I walked into my room and noticed the laptop was turned slightly to the side. A tiny detail, but I remembered exactly the angle I'd left it at. Maybe I was paranoid, I thought. Maybe not. Then came the dinner conversation. My mother was cutting chicken. My father reading on his phone. My sister waited for the perfect moment to drop her line. You know, I saw someone who looked just like our little sister with Aunt Ellen downtown. My father lifted his eyes slowly. Aunt Ellen? He repeated, the name tasting slightly bitter. Yeah, going into a bank, I think. Weird, right? My mother pretended to laugh, but the sound died quickly. Must have been someone else, I said. Or maybe not, she replied, tapping on her phone, with that half smile of someone who just planted something. Dinner went on, but the mood shifted. My father stayed quiet the rest of the night. My mother wiped the counter harder than necessary. And I knew, something was being built behind the scenes. A week earlier, my aunt had stopped by Columbus to sign some papers with me at the bank. A quick meeting I'd asked to keep secret. So when my sister said at dinner that she'd seen someone who looked like us, I understood. It wasn't coincidence. She'd seen us, and kept that as ammunition. In the following days, I noticed the way their glances crossed whenever I entered a room. My mother started asking what I did on Friday afternoons. My father began checking my schedule with innocent phrases. You've been leaving pretty early for your studies, huh? Nothing direct, nothing I could answer without sounding defensive. But it was clear. The mystery was already growing, watered by suspicion and my sister's half-truths. One night, I heard an argument in my parents' room. My name again, scattered between phrases that didn't sound good. Money. She asked Ellen. I can't believe it. That day, I came home with the sick feeling that something was waiting for me. When I walked in, everything was already set up like a domestic courtroom. My things were stacked in boxes near the stairs. Books, folded clothes, my laptop closed on top. On the table, a pile of printed papers. My father sat at the head of the table, my mother with her arms crossed, and her, my sister, standing, phone in hand, wearing that look that mixed triumph and pity. Sit down, my father said, without raising his voice. I sat. He pushed a bunch of papers toward me. PDFs, email screenshots, bank statements, a color-coded spreadsheet with a bank logo, and a digital signature at the bottom. Care to explain this? He asked. I looked quickly. My name appeared in email exchanges with my aunt, as if I'd sent confidential details of the new family business, in exchange for money for my tuition. It all looked professional. Headers, timestamps, plausible dates. But they were lies. Perfect, clean, cold lies. I tried to breathe. This isn't real. Then what is it? My mother shot back, already in the tone of someone unwilling to listen. It's fake. She made it up. You're saying your sister forged all this? My father raised the papers as if the gesture itself proved authenticity. Really? My sister crossed her arms and lowered her eyes, perfectly staged. I just showed what I found. I didn't want to believe it, but she let the sentence die, perfectly timed. My parents exchanged looks. The verdict had already been decided before I even tried to defend myself. I reached for my laptop to show them my emails, but my father pushed it back. Enough, we don't need to see more. You're being fooled, I said. You always believe her. My father said, because she's never given us a reason not to. That hurt more than any shouting could have. My mother looked away. My father pointed toward the stairs. Pack your things. You're leaving tonight. No one cried. No one hesitated. The decision was so cold that even the air felt heavier. As I walked upstairs to get the rest of my stuff, I heard my sister whisper, just loud enough for me to catch it. You should have let Boston die. In that instant, I realized she didn't just want me out of the house. She wanted to erase any trace that I'd ever tried something she couldn't. When I left, the street was empty. The room I found in Boston could fit in a square photograph. A single bed, a crooked-legged desk, and a window that faced the wall of the next building. When the heater broke, which happened often, I slept in my coat, wrapped in my spare jacket. I worked at a cafe near campus, broken shifts. The owner was a big, kind woman, but practical. If you're late, you lose hours. I was never late. Sometimes I went straight from my shift to class. No time to change out of my uniform. My aunt emailed me every Sunday, religiously. Simple subject line, checking in. She never asked, "How are things?" She just wrote, "Eat properly. Pay your credit card minimum before the deadline. Don't let anyone make you feel smaller." I replied to everyone, even when I had nothing good to say. Sometimes just a thank you was all I could manage. Other times, I'd write long confessions and delete them before sending. Late at night, the thoughts came in short bursts. They believed her. Maybe I would have too. What if somehow it really is my fault? Some days, my body moved on autopilot. I smiled at customers, handed them coffee, copied lecture notes, went back to my room, and cried for no visible reason. Other days, I felt a dangerous sort of clarity, a calm, organized rage that made me silently promise, they'll see me win. At the end of my first semester, I earned a partial merit scholarship. Small, but enough to breathe a little. I wrote to my aunt, "I think I can stay now." She replied within an hour, "You never needed permission to exist, just resources." In that cold city, far from everything, I began building a new life. Fragile, unstable, but mine. And for the first time, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the other daughter. I just saw me. 10 years passed. After Boston came the diploma, the internship, the first job, everything moving fast, almost automatically. I moved apartments so many times that I learned to live with the minimum. Every new place had the same setup. Books, computer, the secondhand coffee maker, the old brown suitcase I'd carried since college. I cut ties with my parents so cleanly it felt surgical. No numbers blocked, just silence. The last message I got from them was a generic "good luck," probably written by my mother. I never replied. Every now and then, curiosity won, and I looked up their names on Google. Their business, Sweet Smile Desserts, showed up on the first few pages. Local articles, smiling photos, headlines about entrepreneurs reinventing the healthy treat. They looked fine. I'd close the tab and pretend it didn't sting. My sister appeared sometimes too in promotional pictures. The same trained smile, the same calculated gaze. I looked too quickly, angry at myself for still recognizing her face. At work, no one knew the full story. When people asked about my family, I said, "They live far away," and changed the subject. Sometimes, on long nights, I caught myself imagining reunions, scenes that never happened. My father knocking on my door, ashamed. My mother crying, saying she regretted it. My sister, quiet, out of scripts. Me, answering something neutral. Maybe, it's over now. But none of it came. Time passed, and I learned not to expect it. I also learned not to look at the phone when it buzzed. In the first few years, the ringtone made me jump. Hope tangled with panic. Later, it became habit to ignore it. Over time, I thought about them less. The pain shrank. But it never really goes away. It just changes shape. And every time I thought life had finally balanced itself out, a part of me still waited for the notification sound that never came. The call came on an ordinary Tuesday, end of the workday. Unknown number, Ohio area code. I hesitated a few seconds before answering. "Hello?" A short silence. Then, a voice I'd recognize even in the dark. "Hi, it's your mother." My body reacted before my mind. A cold rush in my stomach. She asked if I had a minute to talk. I said I was at work. A lie. I just didn't want to talk there with people around. I said I'd call later. She sounded relieved, almost anxious. "Okay, talk to me when you can. It's important." I spent the rest of the day dizzy. 10 years, 10 whole years, and she chooses today. Could have been a prank. Could have been a mistake. But it wasn't. The number was still saved. Same ending digits. When I got home, I sat on the couch, holding the phone for nearly 20 minutes before pressing call back. She answered on the first ring. We talked superficially. Weather, health, how have you been? The polite lies people use to delay what matters. Then came the real sentence. "We'd like to see you. Your father too." I paused. For what? To talk. To make things right. I asked where they were living, and she hesitated before giving me the address. Not the old house. A small apartment, in a neighborhood I remembered as a passing zone. Cheap rent, short stays. I didn't ask why they'd moved. The answer was already in the silence. "Tomorrow after work?" she asked, almost pleading. I agreed. Partly curiosity, partly inertia. I wanted to see what was left of them, and maybe, secretly, to confirm the world really had gone on without me. The next morning, I took a train to Columbus. Slept poorly, arrived tired. The building was old, the intercom broken. She came down to get me. Her face looked different. New wrinkles, lowered eyes. My father was sitting on the couch, thinner, gray-haired. He tried to stand, then stopped midway, maybe to see if I'd help. I didn't. We all sat down. They started with small talk. Weather, traffic, time passing. I let them. Sometimes silence is the best mirror. Only when the conversation began to fade did my mother sigh deeply and say what had been hanging in the air. We wanted to apologize, and also talk about something important. And then, The subject that had slept for a decade woke up slowly, as if it had never truly been buried. They started with vague memories, old recycled stories to break the ice, the childhood dog, the school fairs, the trip to North Carolina when I was 8. My mother was the first to say the word sorry, but it was the kind of apology that comes with built-in conditions. We know we were wrong, but you distanced yourself too. It was all a misunderstanding. No one wanted it to happen. My father stayed quiet, fiddling with his hands, like someone rehearsing a line and never finding the right time. When he finally spoke, he went straight to it. Things are hard. Silence. He went on. The business. You remember, right? The healthy desserts, sweet smile. Well, the pandemic ruined us. Sales collapsed, suppliers disappeared, rent went up. And the other daughter? I asked. She's trying to hold things together, my mother said quickly, as if defending someone who wasn't there to defend herself. I stayed silent, staring at the glass of water served in a repurposed jelly jar. Their lives had shrunk. Mine had expanded. And for a moment, I felt a guilt that didn't belong to me. We don't want to put you in a tough position, he continued, but a long pause. We need help. A loan, maybe. Just until we stabilize. The word loan hit like a punch. I can pay you back, he said, with interest. We're not asking for charity. You want me to invest in the business that cost me a family? I asked. My mother looked away. My father tried to argue, saying, that's all in the past. It was just a misunderstanding. His voice sounded rehearsed, tired. Maybe even he no longer believed the story he'd repeated for years. My sister's name came up again, like an inevitable shadow. She's still handling the finances, my mother said, but she can't manage it alone. Of course she can't, I replied. She's always needed someone to bankroll her lies. My father's face hardened. Don't talk about your sister like that. I'm just being honest. You never wanted to hear it before. The conversation dragged on, failed attempts to justify the unjustifiable. They spoke of family, but meant rescue. They spoke of new beginnings, but meant investment. At some point, I realized there was no real emotion there, only need. You didn't call to make things right. You called to see if I was still useful. My mother began to cry. My father stood, tried to reason, but I was already near the door. Before leaving, I looked around the apartment one last time. You wanted a return. Here it is, I said, and closed the door. Inside me, something old began to stir, a mix of rage and long-delayed justice. And it was exactly that week when my sister's shadow crossed my path again. 3 days after visiting my parents, someone knocked on my door. Not the doorbell. 3 short, precise knocks. I opened it without thinking. And there she was. Same posture, same sweet perfume that always arrived before she did. Can I come in? She asked, as if it were just a formality. I didn't answer right away. My first instinct was to close the door, but some morbid curiosity froze me. I let her in. She looked around the apartment, small but tidy, made a neutral comment. You've always been good at living with little. I laughed, without humor. And you've always been good at living off what belongs to others. She pretended not to hear, took a folder out of her purse and placed it on the table. I'll get straight to the point, she said, opening the papers with rehearsed gestures. Sweet Smile can still recover. The brand is strong, we have local recognition. The problem is cash flow. We're short on capital. And what does that have to do with me? She took a deep breath as if gathering patience. I know things got bad between us, but you're smart. You've built a stable life, right? I saw your name in a university article. You've got credibility. If you invest, I can list you as a partner. I stayed silent. Think about it, she insisted. It's a chance to reconnect. The family comes together. The business is reborn. Family. The word made me nauseous. You forged emails, destroyed my relationship with our parents, and got me kicked out of the house, I said slowly, making sure she caught every syllable. And now you want me to fund your reconnection? She kept her tone controlled. I was a confused teenager. I made mistakes. You pulled away too. It wasn't just me. The audacity made me want to laugh. Confused? You didn't break a toy. You destroyed a life. I did what I had to do to be heard, she replied, in a tone that made my blood run cold. A long pause. It was the first time I saw something in her beyond vanity. Conviction. She wasn't sorry. She only regretted being caught. You know what pisses me off the most? I went on. That you always make yourself the victim, even when you're the one stepping on people. I learned from the best. She shot back, lifting her chin. So that's it, I said. You want money. I want partnership. Same thing, just with lipstick on. She pushed the papers toward me. Read them. Think it over. I'm not asking for a favor. It's an investment. You could profit from this. I let out a dry laugh. You really think I'd want to profit from what ruined my life? She looked at me. Don't dramatize. You've always had that martyr complex. The sentence hit like a punch. For a moment, my body reacted the way it used to. Tension, anger. I took the papers, tore them slowly, and let them fall to the floor. The conversation's over. She watched me, face unmoving, then calmly picked up her bag. One day, you'll regret this, she said before leaving. I closed the door and didn't cry. I felt a vast emptiness, but a clean one. This time, I wasn't the daughter being expelled. I was someone who finally knew exactly where she'd never go back. A few weeks after my sister's visit, my aunt showed up in Boston unannounced. She had that direct way of entering my life exactly when I needed her most. She found me at the cafe where I worked and said, without preamble, "They called me." "Who?" "Your parents. They asked me to intervene." My stomach tightened. "What do they want now?" "For you to come back and talk. They said they regret everything." I rolled my eyes. She looked at me with the patience of someone who has seen this movie too many times. "I know," she said, "but maybe it's time to close this chapter. Not for them, for you." She was right. The following weekend, we drove to Columbus. My mother opened the door with the same nervous smile as always. My father looked smaller, slumped shoulders, tired eyes. My aunt's presence changed the air in the room. She sat on the couch with the calm authority of someone who carries natural command. My father, visibly uneasy, kept fidgeting with his mug. They started talking about new beginnings, about family above all, about to err is human, words that sound good until you remember who's saying them. My mother kept trying to justify the past. Back then, we believed what we saw, the papers. Everything looked real. And now? I asked, does it still look real? She looked away. My father sighed and said something that still echoes to this day. You were always more reserved. Hard to read. We just thought, well, that you wouldn't go as far as your sister. I froze. He didn't say it with anger. He said it with honesty. And maybe that's why it hurt more. My aunt stepped in, her voice cold as a scalpel. So that's it? You chose the one who looked promising and discarded the rest? My father stayed silent. The answer was there, in the unspoken. My mother tried to soften it. We only wanted what was best for each of you. The best was kicking me out of the house? I asked. You don't understand. Your father was under a lot of pressure. Pressure. Always that word, as if it justified every act of cowardice. My aunt stood, firm and steady. You two haven't asked for forgiveness. You just want to close the story so you can ease your own conscience. They stayed quiet, and I saw in their eyes exhaustion, fear, and a kind of regret that doesn't come from love. It comes from need, and that kind of regret redeems no one. I stood up too. I forgave you a long time ago, but not in the way you wanted. What do you mean? My mother asked. The kind that doesn't require coexistence. The silence that followed was long. The only one breathing steadily was my aunt. She touched my shoulder and said, let's go. In the car, back on the road, she didn't speak for a long time. Then, still looking at the highway ahead, she said quietly, sometimes we need to see people without the lens of love to understand who they really are. A few days after the visit with my aunt, my father called me. His voice was tense, as if he were reading something written by someone else. Can we talk one more time? Just the two of us. About what? Just to clear things up. I agreed, not out of curiosity, out of the need for closure. We met at a roadside cafe, half empty, smelling of old bacon and burnt coffee. He arrived carrying a folder, as if he still needed documents to justify any emotion. We talked civilly for a few minutes. He tried to stay rational, almost managerial, describing financial recovery plans, expansion strategies, the same vocabulary he always used to hide fear. Then, without planning to, I let it slip. Tell me something. If I were the only one with money right now, would you cut her off to accept my help? The air changed. He looked at me, surprised. What do you mean by that? I mean exactly that. If it came down to a choice, take me in and leave her behind, or keep sinking with her, what would you do? He stayed quiet, took a deep breath and said what I'd always known but had never heard out loud. We wouldn't leave your sister alone. Simple, raw, final. No hesitation. Not even a pause to soften the blow. And in that moment, my whole childhood flashed back in fragments. Her new car, the praise, the silences whenever I spoke. It all made sense. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't manipulation. It was structure. I see, I said. He tried to smooth it over, stumbling over his words. You have to understand, a father's love is different. Every child has their own way. Yours comes with a price tag. I cut in. He lowered his gaze. For the first time, he looked small. Truly small. But it didn't matter anymore. I stood, left money for the coffee on the table, and said, without anger, now I know. I always knew. But now I've heard it. I walked out without looking back. The feeling was strange. Not relief, but clarity. That afternoon, I finally understood what it means to free yourself from a family. It's not about forgetting or forgiving. It's about stopping the search for a place that was never built for you. Decision made. I wouldn't go back. Not to save them, not to be saved. Time did the rest of the work I never needed to do. Months after my last conversation with my father, The news began to surface, quietly, scattered between posts and small-town rumors. Sweet Smile Desserts had closed. First came the debts, then the seizure of equipment, and finally the official cancellation of their health license. The website went offline. The smiling photos disappeared from Google. My sister tried to hold on to the company name, to start a new version, Smile Light, but it didn't last. Suppliers no longer trusted her. Old customers whispered stories about tax issues. She ended up taking a random job, selling natural products at a local market. My father, without a clinic, without a license, became a dental assistant in a neighborhood office. Ironic, maybe even fair. My mother stayed by his side, now without the ornaments of a woman who once thought she was part of an exemplary family. I learned all of it through others, never from them. There were no more calls, no more messages. My aunt stayed strong. We shared dinners in Cleveland, sometimes barely talking. The comfort came from what didn't need to be said. She aged with dignity, and I tried to learn that just by watching her. In recent years, we started traveling once a year. Nothing grand. Sometimes I still dream about that old house in Columbus. Not as it was, but as it could have been. A version where people actually listen to one another. I always wake up with the same thought. Some stories can't be fixed, only continued. In the end, life didn't give back what they took from me, but it gave me something they never had, peace. And maybe that's the closest thing to redemption anyone can hope for.